Welcome to the Southampton Education School Research Seminar Series. I am Achla Gupta. I'm a lecturer and program coordinator of our seminar series. Our events are open to all. We aim to facilitate meaningful conversations and contribute to advancement in the field of education. Thank you so much for your interest in this event. I hope you enjoy it. Please feel free to visit our website for details about our upcoming events.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us today. So this afternoon's presentation, or today's presentation, is titled Schooling, Family and Future Lives of Left Behind Children from Mother-Away Households in the Northern Philippines. I'm going to elaborate on these terms being mother-away, for example, as we move along. But I think it's important, of course, obviously, to situate myself. And I kind of treat this this presentation as a little kind of get to know me and my work portion. So I was trained in the undergraduate in political science, and then I did a master's in development studies. That's why I'm interested in inequalities, quote unquote, underdevelopment. And then I did another master's in global studies. That's why I'm also interested in global forces and how they're influencing education, for example. And for my PhD, I was with I was trained in the sociology of education and at the same time in cultural studies in education. I've been affiliated with the Social Transformations and Education Research Hub at the University of Melbourne. And this hub was really heavy on cultural politics of education, but not so much on the pedagogical aspect of education or the instruction aspect. So it's kind of like more of like the cultural politics and thinking about education more than how to do it. So I'm saying this for you to understand why my presentation is as such, or why is it this way and not the other way, because the genealogy of my projects have been this. At the same time, fortunately, for some reason, I got myself into the media department of the National University of Singapore. And I was working at the Cultural Research Center of that university for my postdoc. And so my work has been heavily informed by cultural studies as well. And I hope you will see that. And so that's the kind of the reason why I'm walking you through that, so that maybe there's a little bit more generosity in appreciating the kind of concepts that I'm going to be pushing forward today. So by the way, that's a photograph of my village. Kiki is smiling because I sent her that photo on the day I arrived for this year's annual leave. It was after the typhoon. So I was, for you who do not know it yet, I was born and raised in the northern Philippines in a farming and fishing village, and I grew up with so many left behind children, so much so that I thought it was the best thing ever to be a left behind child, because my left behind children friends had the best things in the world. They had a bicycle, they always had nice coloring books, they always had nice clothes and nice shoes. They always had Toblerones and chocolates and everything. So they were the it kids in our school. And so it was just the best thing for me. I was just fascinated about how it is to be a left behind child, and kind of underappreciating how it is to have my parents both in the village at that time. And so that's also the biographic motivation where this project, or where my scholarship has been, inspired from or drawn from. So let's situate left behind children, who they are, why are they present, what's going on, what are some sort of the emerging socio-economic patterns that brought this left behind children situation as a matter of concern. So first we'll start with Asianization. Asianization, let's put it this way. Filipinos have been migrating even at 1800s, during the 1800s, but primarily in Hawaii because of the colonial relations that we've had. And they were employed in sugarcane plantations in Hawaii, as well as canneries in Washington State, or in Alaska. And at that time, they were mostly men. However, when, say, the Middle East, as well as other neighboring Asian countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, for example, started growing, I mean, their economy started to grow, they had more disposable income, women started going to work or participating in labor, are becoming part of the workforce, then they started needing people to look after their children. And because of that, there's Asianization. Filipinos started to move not just to the United States as a target destination, but they started to move to the Middle East, to Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, even Cyprus, for example. So at the same time, because of this need for care in these emerging economies at that time, feminization of labor also happened, because who else would be providing care to these children than women? And that's also the reason why trajectories are not just Asianized, but also feminized. And because of this feminization of Asianization and feminization of transnational labor migration, there's actually 7 women in the Philippines. So let me put it this way. Women who are migrating or emigrating from the Philippines are almost always, or have been, twice the number of men who are emigrating. So women double the number of men who are leaving the Philippines. And 70% of these women are actually deployed or end up in elementary occupations. When we say elementary occupations, it's usually being a cleaner, being a house help, or a domestic worker. And so that's the reason why I was interested in working with left behind children whose mothers are working as domestic helpers elsewhere. And because of this, they usually call this phenomenon of women leaving their child behind and having another woman or another person in the developing country look after their child as the international transfer of caretaking. But the concept of global care chains has gained more traction through the years than the concept of international transfer of caretaking. This I want to direct particular attention to PhD students who are probably going to gravitate towards the concept of global care chains, because there's actually right now a kind of like a fight between Parenas, who coined the term international transfer of caretaking, and Arlie Hochschild, who also coined the term the global care chains. Because according to Arlie Hochschild was Parenas' PhD supervisor. And just recently, Russell Parenas claims that Hochschild stole the idea from her. And now she's calling for people to don't use global care chains. So this is PhDs, you also have to be wary about using certain terms as you write your thesis. As a result of these increased number of Filipinos participating in transnational labor migration, the Philippines is now 4th top remittance recipient country in the world, and remittances account to almost 10% of the country's gross national product. So that's 10% of our income. It's basically helping us keep our economy afloat. All right. So the context of the study, where I was doing it, in 2017, it was in the Cordillera Mountains of the northern Philippines. So it's a mountainous region. It's a mining community. It's a mining town. In fact, it's where the first multinational mining corporation was established in the Philippines in 1903. It's where that is. It's also, this village also has been written or has made it to the New York Times because there was an instance, or there was an incident when there was a typhoon. There was a typhoon and 17 men were trapped in the mining tunnels. In this region, as I was telling you, women are also twice the number of emigrating men. So I worked with left behind children here, primarily doing ethnography. I was doing go-alongs with them. You see me there inside the tunnel. Yeah, they took a photo of me and they said, smile. I was scared because it's inside the tunnel. We don't have proper gears. But yeah, if you're doing ethnography, they say you smile, right? So it's a beautiful place, but also very risky because, you don't know if it rains and landslides happen or mudslides happen. So I was working with 7 boys and 7 girls. in 2017, that's for my PhD. I was also interviewing some migrant women. And in 2021 and 2022, while I was doing my postdoc, I was working with migrant women, Filipina domestic workers in Singapore in the middle of the pandemic. So that was also a challenge for me. And we can talk about it, how, the methodological aspect of working with temporally and spatially deprived individuals at that time. Because among the population of Singapore, if you are deployed in elementary occupations, obviously in the hierarchy of people that matter, you're not at the apex of that hierarchy. And you're mostly the ones who are at the receiving end of policing from government. So they are the first ones to be managed, like you can't go out. So the government told them you cannot go out. Their employers are also the ones telling them, even if you have a day off, you can't go out because you're gonna put us at risk, or you're gonna put this elderly person at risk, and all these things. So it was difficult navigating all these mobility restrictions, and they're also overworked during the COVID-19 pandemic. So scheduling interviews was also tough because prior to the pandemic, so they did not have, most of them did not have their own rooms. They would live they would sleep in the living rooms. And how am I gonna do Zoom calls with them? They don't even have their own room. So it was tough kind of scheduling that. It went on, I still have some participants who agreed to have an interview, but it never happened. They signed the consent form, but it never happened because we just couldn't find time. So I really had so much fun doing this project, because on Sundays I would go out. This is what they call Lucky Plaza Mall in Singapore, and it's where most of Filipina domestic workers would congregate on Sundays and Saturdays, similar to Hong Kong at Central. They would occupy parks or like bridges. They would just get whatever they have, mats or anything, and they would just spend the whole day there. And I would do it with them. I would eat with them. I would walk with them. Help them pack their boxes, which we call the Balikbayan box or returnee boxes, and they ship it back to the Philippines. Interesting is what's inside these boxes. Kiki is smiling again because she knows this. So women domestic workers usually they could get hand-me-downs from their employers, right? Like whatever, shirts, clothes, toys, and they put it in the box. Or sometimes when they go to the mall or when they go to supermarkets and something's on sale, like if it's a Spam that's on sale, or like cereals that's on sale, they just buy it, they put it in the box in time for Christmas. So they ship the box. It arrives on Christmas, like days before Christmas. And during Christmas, the family would gather around the box, and it becomes a ceremony it's a joyful experience for them. But it takes a lot of effort to be doing that. Imagine transferring things from your employers. And sometimes they even request for these stores to keep the box, and so that they could just fill it, along the way. All right. So how are children treated within this regime of transnational migration? So obviously, children on the move, particularly 1.5 generation, those who move after they reach 6 years old, they tend to be portrayed as passive, whose voices are often heard as accessories. That's why the metaphor for them would be the suitcase metaphor. They're like, you're just coming with me, you're a suitcase, I'm gonna drag you to the airport, you're coming with me. It's a suitcase. So it's like someone who's like, yeah, just a suitcase, not doing anything. Left behind children too are portrayed as victims, it's like orphans who are, one, at the receiving end of their parents' hunger for money, or at receiving end of the ironies or unintended consequences of transnational migration, like having a toxic father looking after you, so you end up being physically abused or verbally abused because he's alcoholic or he's unfaithful and womanizing, for example. So however, there's hope, because in the sociology of childhood as well as in human geography, there have been advocacies or trends to kind of treat children as social agents. So, in sociology of childhood, children are now considered as, social agents. They have capacities to be independent, to to, shape their own life trajectories. In the geography of children, youth, or GCYF, they are considered as competent social actors. So these are really inspiring, and much of the things that I'm going to be arguing are coming or are drawn from these, traditions. Okay, so I frame childhood both as a cultural and rhetorical, constructs. Cultural because obviously they emerge, childhood emerges from our interactions with each other. Rhetorical because it also emerges in the ways in which we speak to each other, to children. A style of conversation, for example, could be infantilizing. Some older people would be treated as children because of the way, become children because of the way we treat them, right? So childhood is a social construction, and as such, conceptualizations of childhood may vary according to time, place, and the socio-cultural expectations. So it varies too. Like we were in a conversation about voice yesterday, and we were saying pupil or student voice will also vary. What is considered voice in a certain culture might not necessarily be, voice in others. Like silence might be voice in others, right? So trying to make sense of the things that I was doing in 2017 and in 2021 and 2022, I was writing with my former mentor at the National University of Singapore about the domestic regimes in Filipino transnational families. And we came up with these terms, infantile mobilism and mobilized infantilism, as norms or cultural kind of like governance of transnational families. So how do transnational families manage children within this, desire to leave for a better future? So let's start with infantile mobilisms. Infantile mobilisms are beliefs and practices that highlight and use various layers of dependency to rationalize women's emigration. So this usually includes, saying children are the primary motivation for leaving, as well as the salvific intents of women. So women, it's easy to spot this because the moment you ask women why they leave, they will just say, it's for them. It's always, it's for them. And so they will even say, it's because I don't want them to inherit poverty. I don't want them to inherit my poverty, so I'm doing it for them. You will see this in the next slide. Children as inspiration to behave in host countries. You know the stories probably of how women in Filipinas, in Hong Kong, or Filipinas in Singapore would have, or even in Saudi Arabia, who are married, who have, have husbands in the Philippines, and who would have, allegedly affairs with other men in their host countries. But this infantile mobilism is also a way to kind of not sanction, but like to kind of manage women's behavior in their host countries, which is like, I'm going to behave for my kids. I'm not going to be going out with other men because my kids are going to know it. Or like it might be posted on social media and I don't want my kids to be embarrassed. It's also providing the best for them, and women setting aside their personal goals for children. And this is also interesting because it's the extended care to other family members who are not necessarily children, like cousins, or not even their own children. So it's very common in the Philippines to have, say, Jay, who say I'm a domestic worker, but then I would also look after my brother's children, or my uncles and my aunties, not just within my immediate family. That's why it's very common for women domestic workers that I was working with in Singapore to not take the day off as well, which is they will tell their bosses or employees that they're taking the day off, but they're actually taking another job, which is to clean other people's home as well to earn more money. So these beliefs become the tropes in managing and disciplining both the parent who is away and the left behind child. So for example, this one, this is Glenda. She posted it in one of her stories that she misses her kids, she misses her mom, she misses home. She says, but I'm holding on because, of course, as I was telling you, she is doing that for the kids. So this is a quote on how she explains why she's away. But I am doing this for you. How are we going to pay for your school fees? How would you go to your chosen school if I go home and we can't pay for your fees? Providing the best for their children. Digna, one of the domestic workers that I was working with, brought her kids in 2017 to Singapore. That's a lot of money, but she was able to do that. Also this, packing all the nice stuff to their kids, for their kids in the Philippines. So let's talk about mobilized infantilism. So mobilized infantilism, on the other hand, figures in the practical training of left-behind children to look after themselves and their younger siblings while the mother is away. You see the reverse of this now, right? Like it's for them, we're gonna manage you, you're a suitcase, all these things. But here, something is going on. They're now being trained to do some tasks. This is also, children also have to go through some emotional labor, filtering what they say to the mother and worrying. So for example, I had one, Tina, whose mother was working in Cyprus, and the mother just did not respond to her she just went inactive on Facebook Messenger, where they usually communicate, and she was worried for a lot of days, for several days, and eventually her mom became active again, and the mom said, I was rushed to the hospital because I had ulcer. And so those are the kind of emotional labor that they have to go through. Another one is Michael. Michael did not know anything until her mom called, and the mom was just crying and crying and crying. She did not say anything, but she was just sobbing until the older brother took the phone and had a conversation with the mother, and the mother said, I was incarcerated in Hong Kong because my documents expired, and now I'm going to be deported. So these things are the kind of emotional labor that they have to go through. But then they have to act properly, and they have to get their, together, because no one's going to look after them, because sometimes the fathers are also, not dependable. Youthfulness, therefore, in mobilized infantilism is tapped as a stopgap measure. So in other words, their youthfulness, their youthful energies are used sometimes as a source of income to help the family afloat. So this is so ironic, right? In infantile mobilisms, they say this is for you. I'm going to leave because I want you to go to school. I want you to experience a better life. But there are some transnational families who do not end up providing enough for their kids. And this is because, as I was telling you, some fathers end up becoming alcoholic or are using the remittance money to spend on other women, or would not provide for their kids. So what happens is that kids, so for example, this is Michael. Michael dropped out of school the year before I joined, before I did my field work, and he worked in the mines. He also worked in a chili plantation in the lowlands because the father was just, he was physically hurting him, and so he had to leave. He had to, look for his own money. And so that's the irony of it. Women leave for them, but the migration project fails. And when it fails, they have to be tapped into to kind of like fill whatever gaps caused by the failed migration project. So if infantile mobilism insists on the innocence and passivity of left-behind children, in mobilized infantilism, adulthood is prematurely enforced. Right? And this happens at the same time. I'm not saying that they are mutually exclusive. They could invoke it at a certain stage, but at the same time, they could also invoke this. And so when we answer who is a good left-behind child, you probably know what the answer is, right? And so who is the good left-behind child? What are some of parenting practices involved in it? And how do left-behind children respond to these parenting practices? So let's start with some of the interesting characteristics according to mothers about how they want their child to be, or what is an ideal child. So first, of course, it's not a spoiled brat, right? So some of them would like to believe that their children is not a spoiled brat. So for example, Glenda said, I did not train them to be, okay, whatever you want, here, here, here. No, it's not that way. Lydia, this one, Kizel, who's a mother of 3, she doesn't have a great relationship with her kids, and she says it hurts. Ngai is a filler because it's like they do not listen to what I want. I tell them, you will just do what you want. I wanted to work with Kizel's kids through her, but because she has a strained relationship with the kids, I ended up not being able to work with them because of that strained relationship. And this is a pattern that I saw when I was working with women domestic workers, because they're my first point of contact. They're the gatekeepers to their kids. And because they have a strained relationship to their kids, I ended up not being able to interview their kids because the kids do not want them because of that remote parenting situation. This one is another example from Tina. So Tina posted an interesting kind of like in her story that she looked, the filters. There was a time when you could put just like what we have now, right? The photo lab. But she put on a filter on her photo, and one of her kids was kind of like sweet talking her, like, "Mom, you look great, you look so young, blah, 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 blah." And then he started asking, "How about for my birthday, maybe you can give me a new cell phone, new mobile phone?" And then the mom said, "No, I don't think so, we don't have money, you have to wait." So when I did not grant her wish, she did not want to do video calls with me anymore. So yeah, and this one is her post. She's saying, you cry, wipe tears, you smile again. That's the life of a mother. You're struggling, exhausted, but will never give up. So again, going back to infantile mobilisms. Children are also expected to understand the situation and to be an ally to their mother. So for example, Glenda, who unfortunately, and she's very open to it, when I ask her, "Are you okay with me sharing this to the wider academic community?" And she said, "Yeah, sure. Are you okay with with a pseudonym?" And I'm like, "No, use my name. There are many Glendas in the world. Just use it." She unfortunately had an affair while she was in Singapore. And that it became kind of like a big issue. It exploded in social media of their village. And the kids were embarrassed. I mean, obviously the kids were embarrassed, but the kids, according to her, were her support system. They were constantly telling her, "It's okay, Mom, even married people here do that. We understand it because we are not with you, we're sorry." That's according to Glenda. But when I interviewed the son, this was also confirmed. Or sometimes because the dads are alcoholic, right? And the mom would call from Singapore, the kids usually message the mom first and say, "Don't call. Dad is drunk. The conversation's gonna go on and on and on, and you will just end up pissed off." So the mom would not call because the child already told the mom that, it's not a good time. Another characteristic is a good left behind child is someone who maintains open lines of communication. There's this incident with Lydia. Her daughter posted on social media that kind of like a suicide post where she wants to end her life or something. And everybody was freaking out. Lydia was messaging her relatives. I'm like, "Can you look after my child?" Blah, 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 blah. Because I think there was a photograph, trigger warning. There was a photograph of like a wrist and something. And so they were freaking out. And Lydia was saying, "Please don't do that again. We're worried about you." So that's one, open lines of communication. This is where the education part becomes important, because Glenda has 3 kids, and she's really proud when she told me this. Like, when I tell them that they have to study, so she says, "I constantly remind them, whoever gets married while still studying will move out of the house. Because once you get married or in a serious relationship, that means you can now stand on your own." So, yeah. Another characteristic, related to education, is that a child should be committed to finishing university. This is Tina's son. This is really sad. Tina's son moved from 4 universities already, but still hasn't finished university. So one in Baguio, which is close to where I did the city where I did my field work at, and then in Santa Maria, that's in the lowlands, and then another one in Vigan, which is a very Hispanic influence, Spanish influenced town, and another one in Candon. And ultimo, it's extreme, it's the worst. Until now, the child has not finished. And you will see later on what these kinds of behavior does, or these kinds of treatment or attitude towards education does to mothers' parenting styles eventually. This one is Digna as well, and she wants her daughters to finish university, but unfortunately her two daughters got pregnant one after the other. They're just 1 month apart. So yeah, she was like, when she was about to find out that her second daughter was pregnant, she was like, oh my God, not again. She was telling me like, she knew exactly that was about to happen, that's what's about to be told. But yeah. So how do they raise this ideal left behind child? And during their pre-departure, women usually start telling them, this is what you will do when I'm not around. You tell all your problems to your aunt, and she will let me know that you can tell me. And you write letters to me. Letters are better. This was in the earlier times. And some of them still have letters. They showed it to me. At that time, it used to be, in the earlier times, it used to be cassette tapes, if you're familiar with that. And they would just record it, and they would send it. Or they could put it in the boxes, and the child could listen to it. Yeah. And then when they're away, it's remote parenting. So all the women would say, communication is really important, so just to keep in touch. But children do not appreciate remote parenting, of course, right? One, because sometimes they feel like women are ghosting them. This is Lara's quote, because when her mother left, they were still very young when her mother left, and the mother, when I interviewed the mother said when she first arrived in Singapore, she was only earning $20 because the rest of the salary was going to the agency. So she was only earning $20, and she said the only thing that she was eating was a biscuit, because in Singapore sometimes your employer does not pay for your food as well. You have to pay for your own food. And you also have to pay for your own phone card at that time, and she can't afford phone card. But then the child thought she just ghosted them. But she doesn't have a phone, she can't afford a phone card, and so she wasn't communicating, but the child thought she ghosted them. And so the child says, if I will leave eventually, I will not be like her who sort of ghosted us. Okay. So let's talk about how then do parents react when their children do not finish university, when their children get pregnant while they are at university, when these educational aspirations are being derailed because of certain circumstances. One is acceptance. Digna said, I just accepted it. But then she said, well, yeah, but I will continually support them. Because she was saying, we cannot commit a sin. We're a Catholic country. That's why this is a line. This is a common line in the Philippines. When her daughter got pregnant, she's, take care of your children, nurture them. We cannot do anything anymore. We cannot commit a sin. Digna also said, but as long as the situation is still manageable, let it be, let go. What can we do, right? But Tina, remember Tina, the one who has a son who moved to 4 universities? This is interesting because I was asking her, what are you going to do with your third child? What do you think should she be taking for university? She said, I'm not forcing her. That's difficult because just like the eldest, I forced him. So you can see here that they're adjusting their notions of what a good child is. So if the child is derailed, maybe we could invoke certain moral compass so that he doesn't commit any more mistakes, that he's still a good child. A good child is someone who, we recognize the agency and the decision-making capacities of the child as well. So along the way, it gets adjusted. So even if their parents, so this one, most of them, all of them, of course, right, want their children to go to university and finish. But there's also kind of like a temporality into it, a temporal dimension to it, because of course, women who are working in elementary occupations in places like Singapore do not have pathways towards settlement or citizenship. And that means that they cannot be, of course, a permanent resident. They cannot bring their children with them to their place. What that means is that when they're old, They'll just have to go home. That's why Brenda Yo, a migration scholar, calls this the use and discard labor policy. They use you when you don't have energy anymore. They discard you. You go back to your country. And sometimes you don't have enough savings because your salary is not enough, right? So the Digna, for example, tells them, study whatever you like to study while I'm still here in Singapore. I will be able to support you as long as you study. But once she's not in Singapore anymore, then support is not there. When I ask them, this is about the future now, will you also want your children to leave the Philippines? So thinking about the future, Digna says it's just better to stay there in the Philippines. If she wants, the youngest daughter wants to be a police officer, police officers are paid well in the Philippines, so that's okay with her. Glenda, on the other hand, says, in the same way says, I don't want to happen what is currently happening to our family. So in short, she doesn't want her child to leave as well. Lydia, on the other hand, thinks that, well, it's okay to leave as long as it's in more high-skilled professions, like a nurse, for example, but not to be a domestic worker. If she's going to be a domestic worker, she better just stay in the Philippines. That's what she said. So how are children reacting to it? So Lara, for example, recalls, it was a sad experience. Nobody was there during your graduation day, on your birthday. So it was sad because they were still young and there was no one for them. But she also acknowledges, Lara acknowledges that when she got older, she slowly had empathy to her mother. John, on the other hand, who is the son of Glenda, says that he's more motivated to finish his studies. He's currently taking criminology in the university because he wants to be, a policeman. It's a thing in the Philippines, and policemen are paid well in the Philippines. And so this is why when you ask them what they want for the future, John would say, the job that I'm looking for is here, so I'm going to stay here. Okay, so I'm just... Other child responses, of course, will be breadwinning. So as I was telling you, Michael earlier had to go on a drop out of school, work in a chili plantation, also enter the mining tunnels. Michael also had, like Mark, whose mom was in Kuala Lumpur at that time. The dad was misusing the remittances. Michael, too, when her mother came home from Hong Kong, she was incarcerated. She went back to the Philippines. She ended up borrowing money because, of course, she came home empty-handed, and Michael had to help as well. Okay, part of my methodology was to ask them to come up with a collage. And so I gave them newspapers, I gave them colored pens, and I just told them, okay, how are you imagining your schooling, your family life eventually? And this is one of what Michael came up with. And Michael said, I only desire simple things. Just simple. I have a family, that's great. I have a business too. I'm able to save money, and perhaps I'd be able to get a car so that I want to live in a place like this. Mountains, so that's one there. I want to be a musician if I can, but if I have time, I can. So overall, if we try to put things that I've been telling you together, a good left behind child is one who knows how to perform premature adulthood and passivity at the same time. So one who's able to adult when it's needed, but also to kind of be a passive child at the same time. So it's a good child is able to navigate that, those tension. So raising a good left behind child remotely requires mobilization of resources, of course, obviously like time, technology, money, collective solidarities in the village. If you don't have a good relationship, for example, with your mom or your mother-in-law, then you might have to hire another woman to look after your child. Or you might have to just depend on your husband and pray that it's going to be a great parenting. From pre-departure to speculation about potential futures for left-behind children, parents gradually recognize their children's capacity to make decisions on their own, especially during difficult times. And so, therefore, notions of a good left-behind child is constantly being negotiated, constantly being adjusted as a response to changing personal and social conditions. You saw that, right? Like, we don't want to commit a sin. I'm not going to force him anymore because I forced my first child, and things like that. If you're interested with the work that I'm doing, two book chapters were recently published this year. One at the Emerald Handbook of Child and Youth Studies, and the other one is in a book series of the Australian Association for Educational Research, where I talk about how children left behind are producing or imagining their locality. And two are upcoming as well at Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies and AREA, the Journal of the Royal Geographical Society. So yeah, thank you so much for spending your time and questions.